Hi, this is my review of Carnival Zombie. Carnival Zombie is a survival horror Euro style board game. You can play it cooperatively or solo. Before we begin with this review, I want to inform you guys of a somewhat new dungeon crawler that I've seen. It's called Perdition's Mouth Abyssal Rift. It looks like a dark fantasy, very gritty, very bloody dungeon crawler. You can play it solo or cooperatively as well. And I haven't played it yet, but my initial impression, just by taking a look at how it plays and taking a look at the art, it looks really cool. So it could be worth to take a look at it. I'm going to put a link in the description below that takes you to the website, and there are also some YouTube videos about it. So keep that in mind in case you're looking for that, a solo or cooperative dark fantasy dungeon crawler. Now let's talk about Carnival Zombie. In Carnival Zombie, the story is this. Many years ago, there was this huge creature, the Leviathan. It's kind of like Cthulhu's Italian cousin, to put it in a way. And the Leviathan reigned supreme, but eventually it died. And its corpse rests at the bottom of a huge lagoon. But it isn't entirely dead, it's in a state of undeath. Kind of like Cthulhu, not dead but dreaming. So this gigantic corpse rests at the bottom of this lagoon. But then the city of Venice was built on top of it. So the entire corpse is covered with the foundations and the stilts of the city. And in modern times, the Leviathan is about to rise once more, because I guess the stars are right. But it cannot rise up yet because it has all those stilts and the foundations of Venice. So it uses its weird necromantic powers to summon these like legions of the damned. They are basically zombies, but not your average zombie virus type of zombie. They are more like the legions of the damned that have been summoned or called forth to help the Leviathan to release itself from the stilts and the foundations and rise once more and rule over everyone and other nasty stuff. So the players play as these special ops agents that are working undercover during the night of the carnival in Venice. And they need to escape Venice while rescuing survivors. And there's also a small chance that you could kill the Leviathan once more by using this holy bomb that feels a bit like a tribute to the holy hand grenade of Monty Python. And so there are different ways to win the game. Most of them have to do with escaping the city, guns blazing. It's a very exciting game. Now let's talk about the quality of the components. The box itself it's quite sturdy. Everything fits very well inside. There's even like space to spare, so the box it's excellent. And then we have this little sack of black cloth, and here you store different wooden pieces. The game comes with wooden cubes and cylinders and cones. Let me see if I can show them to you. And these represent different types of undead, survivors, paranoia. We will talk about that later on. Something that I didn't like of the wooden components, even though they are excellent, they are sturdy, they feel really nice, and they look, what would we just say, cute. And you have these pieces that are somewhat similar. These are supposed to be, one is white and one is beige, but when you play with poor lighting conditions, it's somewhat difficult to tell them apart. One is supposed to represent barricades, and the other one represents a type of undead. You also have some mini tiles that represent different sorts of terrain. For example, you have this one that represents a tower in Venice, and you have this one that represents like crypts or underground passages. You also have sewers, etc. You also have some other tokens and tiles that represent the characters to keep track of their stress, because here stress is kind of like health or hit points. You can see one of those here. You also have these stand-ups for the player characters, and they are really sturdy and they're nice and shiny, and it's easy to tell apart from all of the characters. You're going to be playing as 6 characters. Even if you play solo, you have to control 6 characters. You also have this tile that represents on one side the boat for one of the end game scenarios. Let me see if I can. Oh, here it is. And on the other side, you have the pile of corpses. And this is a very interesting mechanic. I will talk about this one in a few minutes. You also have the character sheets that are sturdy and look really nice, but they tend to, what would you say, they bend a bit, maybe because of the plastic covering. And then we have cards for the different items the characters can find. There are also nightmare cards that they basically represent different events. Here you have a card that represents Captain Terror, one of the characters. And these are the other cards that I was telling you about, that they show you different events. Sorry. Here we go. They tell you about what characters should be chosen during random events and such. And then you have more tokens. Most of the tokens are just there to keep track of different things. They are really sturdy and shiny. The quality of those components is pretty much great. You also have a board, of course, to play the game. It's really large. Let me see if I can unfold it in its entirety. And then you have a couple of rule books. One is in Italian and the other one is in English. The quality of the rule books is pretty good. This is a glossy paper, also quite sturdy, although it bends, tends to bend up or gets wrinkled a bit at times. But in general, the quality is really good. However, the quality of the translation is not that good. It's not terrible, but you will need to read some sections a couple of times before you get the context of what they're trying to explain. Because this was translated from Italian to English, I think the major error in translation is the structure. Because, for example, in Latin-based languages, or that have the Latin as a root, it usually has a different structure from English. Because, for example, in English, you would say something like the red car. And in Spanish, for example, you would say the car red. El carro rojo. So in the translation, in English translation, there are quite a few errors like that. So instead of saying, oh, the blue sky, they say like the sky blue, and suddenly you're kind of wondering exactly what they meant. But it's nothing like it's impossible to understand. The only really negative thing about the rulebook is that there's a place where it's not translated from Italian. So you're reading the instructions in English, and suddenly you bump into this paragraph that is completely in Italian. So I recommend that you download the free rulebook from the website to know what that paragraph explains. And it's actually quite important because it's the ability of one of the enemy bosses. But despite that, the rulebook is well structured. It's not like the best structure in terms of explaining the game, but it's good. And considering the errors of translation, it's actually well explained and written. Now let's talk about the gameplay. In Carnival Zombie, everything begins during Carnival night. The characters are supposed to be working undercover. That's why they are dressed up Let me see if I can get that. Okay, they're dressed up as characters from a carnival. It's actually it's really nice because each card on the back has like a mini description of the characters and the costumes, the types of carnival characters they're trying to represent, and you also get information on the relationships between the different characters. As you can see, these cards are really glossy. I'll try to they look really nice actually. So the characters are working during carnival night, but when suddenly the undead start to rise and start killing and eating people. So the flow of the game is that you need to move in this. Let me see if I can find that mini map. Sorry, it's a bit. Here it is. You can see this map with numbers. Depending on the difficulty that you choose, you have a starting area. Usually that red area over here, this red area is for the hardest difficulty. And then we have the yellow one for normal. And then we have the green one, and this is for easy difficulty. Although this game is really hard. Easy difficulty feels like hardish, and normal feels very difficult, and difficult feels like nightmare. I've only beaten this game once on the easy setting, so this is a game that is not going to be easy to win at. So you need to move your group from one of those starting places to specific areas on the map that will allow you to escape the city. For example, maybe you want to cross the bridge over here, but this, as you can see, this is a really long route, because let's say that you begin here on the red area or the yellow. It's going to take a while to get over there, but you have also other areas, some of those yellow areas that you can see. In some of them you may actually, for example, radio an airship. In some others you may look for a boat, and in another area, a church, you can throw the holy bomb down a hole, or prime the bomb so it can destroy the Leviathan. And so you have different ways to win the game. And this is during the day, but during the night, the characters have to find shelter inside a building. Let me open this up. Represented by the center of the board. You can see there that big circle. That's the shelter. And the characters have to hold up there and wait until the sun comes up. During the night, first you need to set up things. First, you set up different terrains. Depending on the area of the map where you land, as you'll see in some icons in the map here, they are very small icons, so you won't be able to notice them. Let me see if I can get that into focus. Maybe you can see those like little blue spheres and orange spheres and black spheres. They represent different terrains depending on the area. So for example, maybe and depending on what you get when you draw the nightmare card over here, and you're going to get information as to where to place different terrain, in what ditch or sewer of the map. And for example, here you have a building, and if you get this building, this is basically like an obstacle that covers line of sight, and you won't be able to shoot at the undead behind that building. So it's important to consider all of the different terrain arrangements. But there's also beneficial terrain. For example, that there is a sniper tower that you can use, very handy. It allows you to shoot at adjacent spaces that otherwise you would not be able to reach. And you also have other things, like for example, this is like a holy altar, and when you kill undead here, it's quite devastating for them. I will talk about why the undead here are quite dangerous in a bit. And you also have some other tiles that represent like jerry cans. Oh, here's the tower that I was telling you. Sorry. Uh-huh. And so I was telling you, you also have some other things like the jerry cans, and those jerry cans can be used to cause more damage to the undead during your attacks. And so once you finish setting up the terrain, you set up the barricades, and barricades are very important. They are basically shields that keep the undead from getting closer to your character and attacking them in hand to hand, to put it in a way. Even though there are undead that can ignore barricades because of their ranged attacks, it's important to keep barricades up at all times when possible. And then you set up characters. Now all of the characters have different special abilities, so you need to think about different terrains, because for example, if you see a terrain like the building that I showed you that blocks the line of sight, so it's better to cover that area with Lady Columbine. She is the sniper of the group, so she can actually shoot through the windows of that building, to put it in a way, and she's very good at attacking at long range. But then you also have some other characters such as Vrigel. His ability is basically he's a very badass, almost perfect warrior. He shoots 3 times and has a lot of range. He's also pretty good up close, and he can also bash his enemies quite easily with his weapon. You also have Heliquin, who is very good at moving around. He has a free movement. You can only act once during your turn, unless you decide to take 1 stress. Then if you take 1 stress, you may act once more. And then you have Captain Terror, and he basically orders people around. He's also very powerful because when he gives an order, you can get different effects. Maybe you attack, you get a free attack per turn, or maybe you heal your comrades, or you can perform an assault that is a close quarters combat attack, etc. You also have Dog Pestilence. Dog Pestilence can heal his comrades, but he can also become really powerful if he rescues survivors. They basically give their life for him. They make him more powerful, and they can also sacrifice themselves so that he doesn't suffer stress. Or he can also use those survivors to protect other members of the group. And you also have Pantaleon, and he builds barricades quite fast. So he's very good at keeping the defenses up, and he also has an explosive attack. When he shoots, he is able to damage all of the undead in a single space. So character placement is quite important. And then you have to select the bosses by randomly drawing different color cubes. You determine the type of boss that will come out, and they are really nasty. The color of the cube only represents the type of boss. It's the real representation of the boss. It's either a cylinder or a cone, different shapes. The bosses are quite thematic. You have this one, for example. This is Mistress, the one here, and she basically cannot get attacked without hurting you back. She's kind of like those characters that feel like thorny enemies, because even if you attack her, she is going to hit you back. And then you have this other one, Vestiarius, and he basically gets more powerful the more undead dogs that are at his side. You also have Tenor, and Tenor, he's an opera singer of sorts, and he destroys barricades quite easily with his high notes. And you also have this one, it's called the Joker. He can actually cancel your attacks. It's a very nasty type of enemy. You also have Casanova. And Casanova, because he's supposed to be really charismatic or attractive to the undead, he summons a lot of undead to the map. You have Doge, and Doge is basically, he makes every enemy move faster. And you also have the Admiral. This is probably one of the worst. He can deal damage directly to your character, ignoring barricades. And you also have this one, the Martyr. He is the worst. He's kind of like the tank from Left 4 Dead. He has a lot of health and deals a lot of damage, and it's very scary when he's starting to get up close and you cannot kill him, and you kind of want to focus fire on it so that it doesn't get to close quarters range. Once you finish setting up the bosses for the night, Night sequence begins. You have a little clock that measures. Here it is. Let me see if I can get that closer. Sorry, there it is. The one that looks like a pizza. When you have suns and moons, it measures the hours of the night and of the day later on. Each hour, you get a chance to use items that you have found during your explorations. Some of the items, if you play on easy mode, you start the game with them. So you have different, like for example, guns that will give you stronger attack or more range. Some other effects. You also have, I think it was a chloritic acid, and if you use it, you get to eliminate a lot of foes at the same time. You also have some items like medicinal items that heal stress and paranoia, etc. So you have to be wise as to when to use them, because it's not easy to get items and weapons in this game. And then the infected begin to enter the map by you draw them randomly from here. If you draw a black cube, that's a paranoia cube, and that's really bad. It basically puts a prohibition on the character, so that character is no longer able to take stress to carry out additional actions. And if you draw a blue cube, that's a survivor, and that's really good because you don't need to. If you draw a blue cube, you don't need to draw another undead. It cancels an undead effectively, and if you manage to kill all of the undead in the particular ditch where that survivor is, you get to rescue the survivor, and that survivor will join Dr. Pestilence, and that survivor will make the doctor stronger and give you that sacrificial ability that I was telling you about. And after you draw all of the infected, all of them move. They have different movement rates. Some of them are really fast, like the dog ones, but some of them are a bit more slow, but there are also some of them that have a lot of health, and you actually need to focus your fire to defeat them. Now let's talk about character actions. You get one action per character turn, but you can also take stress. As I was telling you, it's basically like hit points to carry out an additional action. This is the stress meter, as you can see. As long as you're in the green area, you're okay. But when you reach the red area, that's the terror area. And that's really bad. I will talk about why in a few minutes. So your characters can either move or fire or carry out an assault. When it comes to fire, you can fire as long as there isn't something blocking your line of sight. So for example, if you have, let's say, this boss over here, and you have this green one right here, and your character is over here, you need to kill the green character first before you get to attack the boss. But as I was telling you, Lady Columbine is quite useful to go around those things. One other nasty aspect is that if there's, let's say you have a bunch of, like a boss and a couple of undead, you need to kill the undead first before you try to hurt the boss, unless your weapon has a special explosive quality that damages everyone on that space. And as I was telling you, there are some normal undead that require 2 damage to kill them, and you need to focus fire, that is to attack twice to kill them. Some characters that get to attack 2 or 3 times will have no problem with that, but others that can only attack once will need to suffer stress damage to focus fire and kill those undead. And this doesn't apply to most of the bosses unless they have an ability, a special property, because you can deal damage and the damage accumulates until they die. But for example, in the case of the martyr, you always need to deal at least 2 damage to deal just 1 wound. He's a pretty nasty enemy boss. And then after you have killed all of those undead, but I was forgetting about one of the most important aspects of this board game. You need to be intelligent to win this board game, but you also need to be quite dexterous. You have this pile of corpses tiles, and you need to drop the undead that you start killing First it seems quite easy, but as you keep on dropping and dropping and dropping, it's going to pile up, and just like Jenga, they could fall off this pile of corpses tile, and that returns the undead back to the board. So that's really nasty, especially when you have like a ton of them and only 3 or 4 fall down. They come back to unlife immediately. And then the boss and infected attack. If they are next to a barricade, they destroy that barricade. But if they are already next to the refuge, where the characters are, they're going to be dealing stress damage to the characters. And if all of the characters get incapacitated, they lose the game. And then you advance the hour, and that's basically the structure or the flow of the night. If the characters manage to survive the night, they need to spend the day moving through the streets of Venice. It's also important to choose the route that you are taking, because for example, maybe you are fighting here and you want to escape over here, like this would be the east side of the map. So you need to clear that area, otherwise when your characters move through it, they will take damage from the undead that are still there in that ditch. So the characters will move during the day. You need to spend a few hours moving through the map. But in the structure of the day, there is this event known as the sinking of the city. So you draw a nightmare card and you randomly determine a place where you need to put one of these tokens. This token effectively makes it that you will need 1 more hour to move through that place or area. And time will be running up all the time because the Leviathan rises when 4 days have passed. So you need to keep moving, but you also need to dedicate some of those hours to searching different areas or activating special properties of locations. You could find weapons, survivors. You can also find activate the special properties that I was telling you, that sometimes it's vital to activate those properties to reach a certain end game scenario. The different characters have different day powers as well, because for example, Pantaleon can build 4 barricades during the day. All of the characters can build 3, but he's especially good at it. And you also have Heliquin. And Heliquin, he's very good at searching. He's the best at finding weapons, in my opinion, or survivors, because sometimes when you carry out a search action during the day, you could get attacked by some infected that is supposed to be lurking in some dark building, and that also accumulates stress. And once again, when you finish doing all of your daytime activities, you will have to try to survive the night using a particular building as a shelter and surrounding it with barricades. Once you reach a particular situation that allows you to play an end game scenario, you add a sort of like a mini game to the main game. Because for example, when you need to cross Freedom Bridge, you need to move your characters across the map. The map effectively transforms into a bridge, a battlefield of sorts, with this bridge at the middle, and you need to move your characters from this area to the other. This style perfectly integrates with the map, because for example, if I were to have the map completely open, I will put the sorry about that, the tile in the middle to represent to represent the crossing of the bridge. And the same thing is with the airship. When you call it by radio, you need to use the graveyard tile. And all of those scenarios have different rules, because for example, when you are crossing the bridge, you cannot use special abilities, and the undead are climbing on top of the bridge, and you need to choose when you need to kill undead or keep on moving even if you take wounds. And then special enemy bosses will come out during certain phases of the night to try to stop you, and that's the only way I have beaten this game. I won the scenario by crossing the bridge, but only 2 of my characters survived. And the other scenario, that is the graveyard. You need to use the graveyard as sort of like a shelter, but the nasty thing here is that normally when you kill enemy bosses, you return them to their special areas in the map. But during the graveyard scenario, you need to drop them here in the pile of corpses as well. So imagine just dropping this. Maybe you have like a bunch of cubes and you want to like drop this. Imagine that it's all filled with cubes. Drop this cylinder, it's somewhat like, oh, you see, I was lucky, but what if I'm really clumsy and it falls down? Really nasty. And these cubes are quite tricky. I recommend that you take them very carefully from the flat sides, because sometimes they have a bit like spiky corners and they sometimes remain like this. You see? And you're not careful, and you drop them. The other two endgame scenarios, it's basically navigating the lagoon using your boat. And each character has a particular task in the boat. For example, maybe you are at the crow's nest and you get to see the route that you are taking. And if you are steering the using the wheel to move the ship around, you need to choose the route depending on the ditch. It's somewhat complicated to explain, but it's actually really easy once you get to play it. You basically have 4 different pathways like this. This is a pathway, and you start revealing the cards. They indicate a particular ditch or area of the map. So, for example, in case you have some card that says south and it's located in the north, that is no good. So you need to use a special action to swap the cards so that it's possible to use this pathway. As I was telling you, it's somewhat difficult to explain, but it's basically just like a puzzle game trying to form a path when you move around the ship. The other endgame scenario, and that's somewhat it depends on the card that you draw. It's using the Holy Bomb, and you use the Holy Bomb at a church where the Leviathan is supposed to be buried underneath, so you take some turns trying to prime this bomb, but you take stress as you start moving the circuitry inside the bomb, and the undead are constantly attacking you. So it's a bit like a race against time, and that's probably the most difficult route to take in your attempts to win at the game, because it's not always sure that you will find the holy bomb. So that's probably my least favorite way of winning the game, but it's probably the most effective and winning the game in difficult mode, in the hardest difficulty, because as you can see, it's the farthest from the bridge that is over here. So as you can see, you have different ways to win the game, and you also have an optional rule to make things even harder, and that is that the players cannot talk during the hours of the night. You should discuss your strategies with the other players during the day, because during the night you can only give a few instructions such as cover this ditch, help, and such, that really do not explain anything. Although Captain Terror does have a bit of an advantage, he can talk a bit more with the players when he gives them orders using his special order ability. And that's basically the game. So what do I think of Carnival Zombie? I really like Carnival Zombie, but I think there are 2 important things to consider. One, this game is not a game that you want to play immediately after you finish one session, because this is a very grueling, at times torturous experience. You finish playing and you're like, oh, that was so difficult, I don't want to play this game ever again, but you end up playing it in a week or 2. So it's not a game that you will constantly be playing at. It's a game that should be enjoyed every now and then. And the other consideration, as I was telling you, this is a game that feels quite painful, almost like, for example, in Castle Ravenloft. In that game, you're always taking wounds all of the turns. In one turn, you take wounds from a trap, or you get hurt in another turn because of an encounter, or you get hurt because an enemy attacked you first. So it's this is that type of game. Although this is an Euro style type of game, you have a lot of control on how to handle your resources. There are some random aspects to it, but you still feel pretty much in control. Sometimes you decide, I'll have to take some stress, some wounds, because I want to keep the barricades safe for the other knights. So you usually decide not to build barricades at a specific section, because you want to keep all of the barricades intact, and then you decide to assault all of those undead that are up close, and then you build the barricade. So it's all about that strategy. It depends on the type of path that you wish to take to win the game. The different ways to win the scenario are nice. They add variability and replayability, but it's always the same mission: escaping Venice or defeating the Leviathan using the Holy Bomb. So it could feel a bit repetitive as well if you play it too much. It's better to play this once every week or two or month. So this is not exactly the most variable game when it comes to the way of the missions. It's just one mission with different ways to complete it. But despite that, this is one of my favorite solo games. During my questions and answers video, where I was asked about my favorite solo games, because this is not a role-playing game, I did not include it, but on the non-role-playing game side of things, this is one of my favorite games. It's very exciting to move across the city, and you feel surrounded by these waves and waves of undead. To put it in video games terms, it feels like the Left 4 Dead or Gears of War, where the enemies come in waves and waves. So I would definitely recommend this game if you like a resource management type of game, and if you don't feel too frustrated or annoyed that you have to take wounds every now and then, that you have to sacrifice survivors, that suddenly your perfect plan goes down the drain because you drew a really negative event. There's a particular area of the city that you wanted to go across, and suddenly that area is underwater. So I recommend this game for those that like resource management and are not afraid of taking some losses every now and then. So thanks for watching my review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. See you later.